The day I buried my father, Eleanor Grayson, our neighborhood's self-proclaimed HOA tyrant, slapped a foreclosure notice on my front door. That's when I realized this inheritance would be anything but straightforward. Your house is now HOA property, the notice declared in bold letters. My hands shook, not from grief this time, but from rage. My father hadn't even been in the ground for 6 hours. If you want to know how I fought back against a woman who tried to snatch my childhood home, stick around. Trust me, revenge tastes sweetest with a side of justice. I can still hear the last conversation I had with Dad like it was yesterday. He was sitting in his favorite armchair, the one Mom had reupholstered 3 times before cancer claimed her 5 years ago. His hands, rough from 30 years of carpentry, gripped the armrests as he leaned forward. "Lucas," he rasped, his voice worn but resolute. "This house isn't just wood and nails, it's our legacy. Eleanor's been trying to turn everyone into her little pawns for years. Don't let her win." I didn't grasp the weight of his words then. But now, staring at that foreclosure notice with its forged letterhead and Eleanor's elegant signature, it all clicked. The neighborhood had shifted since I left for college a decade ago. What used to be a tight-knit community, where neighbors swapped sugar and watched each other's kids, had morphed into Eleanor's personal domain. The homeowners association she'd formed 3 years back was her tool of control, a weapon she swung at anyone who dared to stay independent. Dad had been her biggest hurdle. Our house, a craftsman-style gem he'd kept pristine for 40 years, stood out on a street of cookie-cutter beige paint jobs and uniform mailboxes. Ours stayed defiantly unique. With its rich green exterior and hand-carved porch posts Dad had crafted himself. I wandered through the empty house, my footsteps bouncing off the hardwood floors Dad laid when I was 12. Every corner held a memory, the height marks on the kitchen doorframe, the dent in the living room wall from my first indoor soccer mishap, the window seat where Mom read me bedtime stories. Eleanor couldn't take this from me. I wouldn't let her. A knock jolted me from my thoughts. Through the stained glass panels Dad had restored last summer, I spotted Eleanor's impeccably styled gray hair and tailored blazer. She stood on our porch like a predator, a thick folder under her arm. "Lucas, dear," she called, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm so sorry about Henry. He resisted progress, but I'm sure you'll be more reasonable about joining our little family." I cracked the door, keeping the chain latched. "I'm not joining your HOA, Eleanor. This house isn't yours and never will be." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. "Oh, but it already is. When a property's surrounded by HOA members, it's automatically absorbed. Adverse possession, you see. Your father's passing just sped things up." I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew she was bluffing. Dad had drilled our rights into me when he got sick. "That's not how adverse possession works, Eleanor. Leave the law to real attorneys." "Speaking of attorneys," she said, pulling a paper from her folder, "I've filed the paperwork. You've got 30 days to comply with HOA rules and pay 5 years of back dues, or we'll seize the property." I slammed the door, the chain rattling. Through the glass, I saw her smirk widen as she set the document on our welcome mat, the one Mom had crafted in her pottery class years ago. As Eleanor strutted off in her high heels, I grabbed my phone and did something Dad would have cheered for. I called Rachel Kim, the sharpest real estate lawyer in the state. If Eleanor wanted a fight, she'd get one. What she didn't know was that Dad had left me more than a house. He'd left me his grit. Rachel Kim's office smelled of leather and resolve. She pored over the stack I'd brought: Dad's property deeds, Eleanor's sham foreclosure notice, and a creepy batch of surveillance photos I'd found in our mailbox. Shots of me checking the mail, tending Dad's roses, even working at his garage bench. "She's building a harassment case," Rachel said, tapping a photo where I seemed to be yelling at Eleanor through my car window. "She's framing you as the aggressor." Classic HOA scare tactic, but she's gone overboard. A knock interrupted us. Clara Evans, our 80-year-old neighbor, shuffled in with her floral cane and a faded envelope. "I hoped I'd find you here, Lucas. Your dad wasn't Eleanor's first mark, and he won't be her last unless we stop her." Clara had lived across from us for 40 years, resisting Eleanor's reign with her quirky garden gnomes and bright orange door, a quiet rebellion against HOA sameness. 3 years ago, Clara went on, pulling papers from her envelope. Eleanor pulled the same trick on the Carter family. Young couple, new baby. Their house bordered HOA land. She filed fake papers, claimed it was automatically hers. They couldn't fight, sold to her son's real estate firm for peanuts. Rachel's eyes narrowed as she studied Clara's documents. This is a pattern. And these signatures? Nearly identical to the ones on Lucas's notice. She's recycling templates. My phone buzzed. Another email from Eleanor, this time CC'd to the HOA board. She'd attached photos of Dad's backyard workshop, claiming it broke building codes. That workshop, built by Dad's hands 20 years ago, predated her rule. She's crafting a paper trail, Rachel explained. But here's her mistake. I dug up county records. Her HOA was never properly registered. She's had no legal authority for 3 years. A commotion erupted outside. Diane Porter, Eleanor's HOA enforcer, stormed in, her usual flawless makeup streaked, her hands trembling around her designer purse. I can't do this anymore, Diane blurted. Eleanor's lost it. Last night, she asked me to notarize backdated papers saying your dad agreed to join the HOA before he died. When I said no, she threatened to leak my financial troubles to the board. Rachel leaned in. Would you write that down, Mrs. Porter? Before Diane could reply, my phone buzzed again. A text from my neighbor Mike. Eleanor's at your house with a locksmith. Says she has court orders. I stood, but Rachel grabbed my arm. Wait. Let her bury herself. I'm calling the cops. Then we'll give her what she craves, an audience. Clara grinned, her lined face alight with mischief. Time to show that power-hungry buzzard what real community means. 15 minutes later, we pulled up to my house. Eleanor was directing a locksmith at my front door. Her posse of HOA loyalists gathered on the lawn in their matching beige and blue outfits, like a suburban militia. Stop right there, I shouted, Rachel and Clara at my sides like battlefield commanders. Those court orders, let's see them. Eleanor's smile flickered before she regained her poise. Lucas, dear, don't make a scene. This is a simple property transition. The HOA has rights. The HOA, Rachel cut in, that was never legally registered? The one with no authority, Mrs. Grayson. The locksmith hesitated, glancing between us. Eleanor's face reddened under her makeup, but she doubled down, pulling out her phone. You want to play tough? Check your email, Lucas. You'll find some intriguing photos of your father's final days. Wonder what the board would think about what really happened the night he died. My blood froze. What was she implying? Dad had passed quietly in his sleep, or so I'd thought. The night your father died, Eleanor pressed, her voice ringing across the lawn. He called an emergency HOA meeting, begged to speak privately. He was ranting about mistakes, about protecting you. Hours later, he was gone. Convenient, no? A memory slammed into me. Dad's last voicemail, one I'd been too swamped to return. Lucas, I found something about Eleanor, about what happened to the Carter house. Call me back, kid. It's big. Clara stepped up, her cane striking the ground. That's not what happened, Eleanor, and you know it. I was there that night. Tell them what Henry really said. Clara, your memory's failing. Eleanor sneered. It's sharp as ever, Clara shot back. Henry came to expose you. He'd found the paperwork, hadn't he? The real reason you started this HOA. Diane emerged from the crowd, clutching a portfolio. I've got the originals here. Eleanor didn't launch the HOA for property values. She built it to cover her real estate scam. Every house she forced into foreclosure, every family she drove out, ended up with her shell companies. The locksmith slipped away as Eleanor's supporters murmured, their unity fraying. Lies. Eleanor spat, her composure cracking. I built this community. I saved us from falling values, from riffraff like the Carters. And the Singhs? The Wilsons? Rachel countered. All families who coincidentally sold after joining your HOA. All properties tied back to you. I played Dad's voicemail on speaker, his steady voice cutting through the tension. Lucas, I found something about Eleanor, about what happened to the Carter house. Call me back, kid. It's big. He died 3 hours later, I said, my voice cracking. Not from illness, but a stroke, stress-induced, the doctors said. What did you say to him, Eleanor? Her mask shattered. He was going to ruin everything. 30 years I've watched this place rot. People like your father, with their stubbornness, their individuality, dragging us down. I made us valuable. By destroying community, Clara retorted. By pushing out young families, intimidating old folks. That's not value. It's greed in a fancy jacket. Mike stepped forward, once Eleanor's staunch ally on the HOA committee. I've recorded every meeting for years, including the night Henry died. Want to hear what really went down? Eleanor paled. You're all making a terrible mistake. This neighborhood needs me. No, I said. We need our community back. Rachel, what's next? Rachel held up a stack of papers. Affidavits from 12 ex-homeowners, all Eleanor's victims. Proof her HOA's a sham. And a court order freezing her assets and companies pending investigation. Right on cue, a police car rolled up, followed by 2 unmarked vehicles. You can't do this, Eleanor whispered, defeated. Oh, we can, I said, pulling out Dad's final ace, a ledger from his workshop. Dad tracked everything you did. He was guarding this place, and me, till the end. As the cops led her away, Eleanor turned with a chilling smile. You don't know what you've unleashed, Lucas. Not a clue. 3 months later, I stood in Dad's workshop, tracing his workbench. Sunlight spilled through the windows, illuminating sawdust like golden echoes. The case against Eleanor had unraveled a corruption web across 5 neighborhoods, 17 families displaced, including the Carters, who'd soon reclaim their home. Her empire was collapsing, her assets locked, her name ruined. Yet her last words lingered. A knock broke my reverie. Diane stood at the door with an envelope. We found these in Eleanor's office. Police cleared them for return. Inside were decades of photos. Dad at block parties, fixing neighbors' roofs, teaching kids woodworking. Eleanor had stalked us for 30 years, documenting the community she claimed to save while tearing it apart. There's more, Diane said quietly. The night your dad died, he confronted her with proof of her first victim, before the Carters, before the HOA. It was your mom's childhood home. The truth hit hard. Mom always said her parents sold due to money woes, but Eleanor's notes showed she'd rigged their mortgage at the bank. Your dad found out while sorting papers for you, Diane added. He called that meeting to expose her without dragging your mom's name into it, protecting her memory to the last. Outside, Clara ushered the Carters up our walk, their little boy, now 4, gaping at Dad's rose garden. Mike arrived with papers dissolving the HOA, replaced by a true neighborhood council. No fees, no rules, just neighbors helping neighbors, like Dad always wanted. Eleanor didn't just target profit, Mike said. She went after people with real bonds, your dad most of all, because folks followed him naturally, not her. That afternoon, I sat in Dad's porch chair, watching a block party bloom. Clara shared her lemonade recipe with Mrs. Carter. Their son played with a wooden train Dad made years ago. Rachel brought news. Eleanor took a plea, jail time and restitution. But the real win was the neighborhood's revival. Diane's granddaughter sported purple hair. Mike's partner showed off his gnome collection. The Sings were moving back, and Mrs. Wilson planned a curry night. I finished Dad's last birdhouse, hanging it on Mom's oak tree. You were right, Dad, I whispered, chiseling the wood. It's not just a house, it's a legacy. As night fell, neighbors shared stories of Dad, Mom, and our past. Kids romped on unmowed grass, laughter echoing down streets too long silent. Eleanor tried to force perfection, but Dad proved real community grows from open hearts and helping hands. Unbreakable, unforgettable, and home.